right. Yeah, it's one of these. It's one of these. Well, I didn't stream Friday. Did I stream on Thursday? Can't remember. Ian, one of those weeks. I actually have family in town, in-laws or relatives of in-laws. They went to do something and I ended up by myself and I was kind of messing around doing nothing. And I thought, I should probably be doing something. Um, so I decided to do this. I actually had it's been a fruitful day of my mind moving in different topics and or just fruitful a fruitful inspirational day. I don't know why. We didn't do anything particular. I didn't read anything amazing, didn't watch anything amazing, but for some reason my mind was all kind of I don't know. Things were happening in the old brain and I was trying to write it down, mostly on my phone because as much as I think we talked about this back in one of the lower 24 streams, as much as I love physical stuff, and I do like using notes and or using notebooks and writing, but like today, I put on a different jacket. So I had a physical notebook it's in my other jacket. This is just what happens to me all the time. So I'm always grateful for having my phone because I know that I can get it on my phone. If I have a minute to write it down, I can get it on my phone. And I've been using what is this called? Anytype to write things down to kind of do that. And it's got a lot of it's pretty granular and atomic, and so you can really kind of just get some ideas down, link them together. I'm not going to do the update right now. So that's kind of what I did. Hey, Howard Hughes is here. Well, let's your devices fire up the old stream machine. Yeah, pretty much. Now I don't know. So the key thing is I don't know how long I'm going to be able to go. I don't know when my family is going to show up knocking on the door. And because we have guests, you may hear me all of a sudden go, "Well, got to go," and then bail out. So be aware of that. I don't. It's not like they're out of town. They're just out. I'm hoping I'll have like an hour or so before I have to worry about them breaking down the door. And I'm also hoping that they'll send me a text that they're on their way home. But I don't know. And this is what I'm drinking here, and I got this in the UK. I really love it. I'm a big Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll fan, and the Mad Hatter, probably my favorite character. And so I got this China, like a they call bone China teacup, and this tea. They call it an afternoon tea. It's something national parks theme, but I forget exactly. But it's good. Is good. And I don't mind the caffeine because I need to do. I'm not a religious person, but I could probably do Lent or something. Give up caffeine for 30 days because I could drink this whole. I basically use a French press, which is right here off camera. Ooh, lovely French press to steep my tea in. I could drink this whole thing down. I probably will, and then go right to bed. Um, you know. Oh no, Ian's got COVID. Oh, sorry to hear, Ian. Yeah, I feel you on the not so productive COVID days. Um, so one of the things that I had a couple different trains of thought that occurred to me, and I'm just trying to kind of, and I'm using Ouija here just kind of to help get the connections better. Because what I like with something like any type, I can connect as I did here, connecting these different files together, but I can't see the connections. What I like, maybe there is a way to see it. I know some of these, I think, have Obsidian, I think, has a way you can look at kind of the map of it, but I don't know. I like being able to sort of plot it out. And I also think, which is a powerful, and I've been reading about this in that book on taking good notes, that retyping of things, that's having to put it in your own words and kind of redo it again. It has positive qualities to it. I think that goes back into kind of writing it. And obviously, I'm not writing it right now, but typing it, I think, will just give me a chance to kind of see it again. And of course, speaking about it as I'm going through, I think also I find helpful because my daughter and my wife don't care about this stuff at all. So it's not like I can, if I started talking to them about saying, "Ooh, I'm so excited on coming up with on sort of fleshing out these wilderness travel things," they would just, okay, Todd, thank you very much. We're gonna go back and do something else. Oh yeah, Brian, yep, Brian. We had the intelligent sword conversation over on the forums. If you want to go check it out, I'm sure there's lots of stuff, and I think I think the last points that Dungeon Master Masterclass made about wanting to have stuff that really fits, I think is a good one. I don't tend to have lots of magic stuff, and then there's only a small percentage of that that gets to be intelligent. So from that standpoint of being inundated with a bunch of talking weapons and things like that, it's not, at least hasn't come up yet for me. I tend to treat them like kind of like hirelings, where I'll control hirelings, but they don't talk all the time. But then when there's something kind of happening, they'll chime in one way or another, and sort of use that moment to kind of help. I don't know, give voice to the world or something. And that's how I kind of feel about as the GM, sort of leaping into that character of, because I think that one thing Dungeon Masterclass said that I don't think is necessarily true is just because you're an NPC and you're there all the time doesn't make you a DMPC. In other words, that because I have no stake in it. To me, and this can get into the whole NPC versus DMPC, but the thing is that what I feel like sets it up is that the when you get to the, and by DMPC I mean a DM, dungeon master controlled player character. And you get in this whole thing, well, isn't that just an NPC? Aren't all NPCs DMPCs? And I think for several reasons they're not. The main one, I think the core one, you can cut everything else away because depending on the system, if you're playing something like OD&D, then an NPC is going to look stat wise and everything just like a PC. First level fighter is a first level fighter. NPC for PC doesn't matter. So there's no difference. It's not, hadn't yet made that split uh, to with the what's the asymmetry between player characters and non-player characters, right? So at that point you go, what's the difference? Well, the difference is an NPC for me. I have no particular stake in them survival. I am not trying to live out my own gaming desires through them. They're just a thing in the world. They're no more or no less important than other things in the world. Whereas the thing with a DMPC, you have you are there is this element of I want to play. I mean, that's usually what comes up. I want to play as a character, but I'm the DM. So what can I do? I'll make up a DMPC. That's where I fall into it. So to tie this back to magic weapons, just because there's a magic sword in the group doesn't make it a DMPC like I'm honing it on their action, because that sword is just a thing in the world, like a hireling, like the barmaid. And it's in the party. It doesn't have to be yapping all the time. And if it's doing that, it's probably saying more about me wanting to, not being willing maybe to hand over the spotlight to the player characters, or something, or trying to just keep hearing the sound of my own voice kind of thing. I think less about the thing. But I do agree that you could certainly go overkill on there, unless that's the kind of game you want where everything's talking all the time. Brian Smith says, I like having them have different ways to communicate. So a player might ask how their sword's reacting or something too, and get some context clues about the scenario or whatever. I mean, that is kind of built into it, Brian Smith, because if you notice, the option that's most likely going to come up is like empathy, which is just, you may grip the sword, and you might get a good feeling or a bad feeling or some kind of emotional thing, but it's not talking. And of course, you've got like it literally talking, and then you have telepathy type thing. So there's definitely room, and of course, you could expand that to have different things. Maybe the sword vibrates or something. Like, you can even think about, in a way, those swords like Sting that glows when orcs are near. Is that just a power, or is it a function of its intelligence that it can sense orcs? It can glow, and it uses its intelligence to want to tell you when orcs are near, so it glows. Because that's the only thing it can do, right? It can't talk, can't make itself warm, can't do these things, but it can glow. And so it wants to warn you when orcs are near, so it glows, right? There's different ways you could kind of think about, like, oh, maybe that's really a function of trying to communicate, less than just a power, the power to glow when orcs are near, or is it a smart sword that can sense orcs and also has the power to glow, and it uses its mind, if you will, to put them together. So what we're looking at here is, I'm thinking about these expedition actions, which I'm thinking about a lot. I go back and forth in these things, but for me, what I come down to is, in my games, I tend not to, because sometimes we can think about some of these procedures as they are standing in for walking through and doing the thing to do. So what do I mean by that? If you're going to use a hunting or foraging roll, like here I have this foraging roll, or I'm working through this kind of foraging options. You What you're doing is you're rolling the dice instead of role playing out for however many minutes or whatever, someone foraging or foraging, right? Going out and looking for berries and things like that. I don't know a lot about that. I'm not knowledgeable in that. I think Leaves of Three Let Them Be is probably as close to the my foraging skills and just like, hey, not needing any berries unless you're really sure what they are. And I know that like mushroom, whatever they forget whatever they call, not mycology, but whatever it is, people who go and forage for mushrooms. Like, that's a skilled thing. Like, I know enough to know that I don't know much. I know enough to know that I don't know enough. So for me, if I'm running a game and some folks are out in the world and they're in the woods and one of them raises their hands and they say, "Hey, I'd like to go spend some time foraging," I'm not going to want to role play it because I don't know. I At that point, maybe the player knows some stuff and we can just take the role and then they can narrate. If they know about it, they can, maybe that would be a good thing for them. Okay, we're gonna roll, see how well you do, and then you can narrate kind of what happens. I don't know, but I don't know anything about it, and I don't know that. Maybe I'm missing. Maybe there's something I'm missing if I got into a game that was super into foraging, right? But at the moment, I think, you know what, just foraging. You're spending that time to forage, and maybe knowing a little bit about what you're doing, whatever, but just saying, "Hey, I wanna go spend this time foraging," um, you know, great. And maybe we'd come down to some kind of, is there a skill attached to it or some kind of knowledge or lore so that you more than me know which berries are good, which berries are bad, so on and so forth. The fact that you could probably just do that on the roll, and then maybe you make it a secret roll, and if it's a bad roll, then you're starting to find poisonous stuff and things like that, as opposed to good stuff, and that might just be a way to do it. So for me, I'd want to have foraging as something that we're using some kind of mechanic or procedure to do, as opposed to role playing it out. Same thing more or less with travel. For the segments you're traveling, all right, we're traveling 3 hours. Maybe something happens that we need to cover or not. If we're walking by, I'm not going to, if you say you're walking for the next 3 hours and there happens to be a battle taking place next to you, we're going to stop and deal with that. But the act of walking, whatnot, and or say, doing that part, I'm not interested in, roll to walk. No, you're just traveling, right? So we're going to take it as read that you can travel at whichever speed and thing that we say we've agreed upon via whatever stats you have, whatever mounts you have, if any, whatever. Right, we've got that figured out. We're walking. So that's another thing that, at a certain level we are abstracting away. We're not checking our every step. We're not, doing anything like that. We're going to say at least whatever until something comes up, until there's an event in the world or a random encounter or whatever it is. You're walking. And hunting would be similar to foraging. Maybe I could even combine it into one. I don't know. I went on this whole. So one of the things I did. So let me. I want to switch gears for a second because it's going to actually come in when if you're looking at this, you're peeking at this side of the table. You might see some words. I actually already changed these because at first I know some games have used supply. I think Into the Weird and Wild used supply. I'm sure it's not the first one. And I actually was going to go with that. And then I changed my mind. I changed my mind because I thought there was something I liked a little bit better. Because something I don't like about supply, it's not a good thing or a bad thing. Okay, right? All this stuff is just personal. Uh, my things that appeal to me is what I should probably, you know what? I'll just make some things for it. So what I wanted to do is split up. I like the idea of kind of not necessarily having to worry about, like we do with rations, right? Rations to a certain extent is kind of abstracted in a way. You buy iron rations, okay, or you buy non-iron rations. They're generally, and I think what iron, I don't know, they last longer, but it's at a certain point, I don't know who's even checking that stuff. Probably should just say you got rations, right? And if you were to go hunting and you were to skin the deer, blah blah blah, do are you? Well, I guess first you find the deer, or assume it's a deer. You find a deer, you kill the deer, you skin the deer, you do everything you need to do to butcher the deer, and then you have deer pieces. We would probably at some point just convert them into rations. They're good. Maybe there's some games they're going to keep separate charts, separate tables, and check how much they're going bad, whatever like that. But I'm not doing that. Ian sees materia. Well, yeah. So materia. So I'll get to it because there's a little bit of, not want to say super Final Fantasy in there, but there's a little bit in there. So what I decided to do is I didn't want to get quite as zoomed out as supply. And supply, at least I believe in Into the Weird and Wild and probably in other games, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, is basically everything in one sort of abstracted resource, whether it's fuel for fires, whether it's water, it's food, everything is supply. And so you just keep track of this one resource, and essentially it exists in a quasi state until you use it. If you have 5 resource and you want to feed 5 people, good. If you have 5 resource and you want to make a huge bonfire, also the same stuff, right? If you're in the desert and you need water, same stuff. And I don't, I don't love that much. That to me seems a little bit too much abstraction. But what I thought is, well, I kind of like the rations abstraction, and I also have never found a good way to track the water part, right? Your water skin full of water. In most parts, if you're in the woods, in most woods where you're going to find water sources, I don't know. At least I think of the forest land around here. Unless there's been a serious drought or something, you're going to run across plenty of rills, streams, brooks, things. Not to mention your puddles, pools, all that stuff to get some water of some kind. It's I feel like it's more in the it's like if you don't have it in the desert or you're going to consume more of it in the desert, and that's it's more of a dear resource. But for the most part, I've never been in games where we've really tracked water skins and water. So I thought, you know what, food and drink, if we want to put that as one something, and that you just that to me works better. It's not super broad. It's not something that transforms from firewood into water, but it's enough that I'm like, okay, I just want to know that you have it. It's because it's more going to be about managing that. So I call it provisions. And that's it's a familiar word, means usually food, drink, other stuff. Great. So you have provisions, which can be a meal's worth of food or a day's worth of water. So if you're in a desert and you're going to go through provisions because you're going to be using up a lot of water, or you're somewhere else and you're going to be eating meals. That's kind of how that will work. And I'm fine with that. I'm fine. It doesn't totally solve the, well, what if we have tons of food and we don't have any water kind of thing? And but I'm okay with that. Uh, I'm fine with kind of one sort of generic starvation as opposed to having to worry about either one. And if you're in a desert, you're going to go through a lot of provisions looking for water. I think that works fine. Um, and then fuel for stuff that you're burning, it's usually going to be wood. But I also want to think maybe maybe you find peat moss, maybe you find, or I guess you'd have to dry it out. But whatever you find, whatever it could be, like I don't care. It might be you might be finding driftwood and kind of that kind of thing near a lake or whatever the ocean. You might be finding, or it could be dried grass. Like I don't care. I don't care. It burns. That's his thing. It's fuel. Hey, Daniel. Daniel says transform firewood to water is the third level spell. Yeah, pretty much. So I just think, you know what? Fuel. All the stuff that you might be burning, old people's hair, your own clothes. I don't. I don't care. Um, it's fuel, and we'll just do fuel, and then materia, as Ian says, kind of. I want it. I it has that magic connection because with the idea with the materia, and I this is why it has a longer. I'll just read you the description I wrote up. I think I wrote this up at the end of lunch. Went to a Korean barbecue place for lunch. If you haven't had Korean barbecue, I'm assuming you're kind of a meat eater. I mean, it's nice. And kind of at the end of it, I was writing up. So I got this kind of. I was trying to think of what to call it, and I wanted to call it something that might match up for a few different things. So I went with materia. But yeah, there is definitely a Final Fantasy crossover. But anyway, materia, as I wrote anyway, materia represents specialized ingredients, reagents, or components for poultices, elixirs, potions, spells, and other magical or alchemical purposes, or other, I guess, devices. I don't know. It's not really a purpose. I'll have to fix that. Did I underline that? There you go. They might include herbs, fungi, roots, berries, leaves, stems, flowers, insect husks, shed reptile skins, or small animal bones. And of course, that's not supposed to be an exclusive list, but we're talking naturally occurring stuff, right? Because you're out here foraging for it. You're not finding it in someone's laboratory. One unit of materia would fulfill one consumable material component of a spell, recipe, or formula. So the idea here is that, and a little bit, frankly, a little bit of inspiration from kind of the component pouch. It's not a bottomless thing, right? In D&D in 5th edition, it's sort of if you have material components that aren't really specified, like a 500 gold piece diamond or something like that, it's assumed that you kind of have this material pouch or you're using a wand or whatnot. If you're using the material pouch, you just kind of have stuff in there and you're able to, I don't know, whatever it is, you're able to find the stuff you need for a particular spell and you fling it up in the air, you throw it in somebody's face, or you eat it. I don't know, whatever it is you do with it. Hocus pocus, abracadabra, and you do the thing. So in the fifth edition cases, they've totally abstracted it all out. I think it's just assumed that it's basically always full with whatever it is. And it doesn't cover every spell because some spells have named components, but it's, everything else falls in there. This is a little bit like that. Whereas if there's a spell that requires a 500 gold piece diamond, this you can't fill it from this. But these other things, the witches in Macbeth, Eye of Newt, whatever, right? The tongue of goat, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is the kind of stuff that you might find. I mean, tongue of goat, that might be a bit big, but all those kind of things, like Eye of Newt, would totally qualify. A bat wing, all those little things. You need mandrake root, all these things. So you go out and you find one of those. And again, I'm fine with the abstraction. I'm not an herbologist. I don't know all that stuff. I know those things are out there, but I'm not interested in going sort of Harry Potter and having a class on how to pull out the mandrake root and deal with it. I don't care. But this is more like, hey, you kind of have this way of going and or have this a generic resource for all that, but you have to go get it yourself. So if you want this stuff, in my worlds, there don't tend to be yield magic shops where people are selling you all those things. These are things you kind of got to go get. Here's a method to go get it in sort of an abstract way. So hopefully it's not. I'm not going to get. I don't want to get into the details, but you can just say on a spell, hey, it requires so much materia to do the spell or ritual, or it could be for any of those things. Oh, there's a potion. It requires this, and 3 materia. Great. Let's go out and get some materia. That's kind of how that works. So, and I'm pretty darn happy with this kind of resource split. I must say. Maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know, but I kind of am. I kind of feel pretty good about it. To me, it's not as abstract as just supply, and it does cover a bit more ground because I don't think supply covers kind of reagents or spell material components, that kind of thing. But I'm kind of digging that. I have to say, and I think it'll work well for at least for me in terms of what I want, what I feel. What it's like I said, what I feel okay with abstracting away. Like, what do I not want to deal with? What do I not want to know much about? And that's not to say that if I know there's that book that I think came out recently, or that was all about going into different herbs and things like that. And I think if I really wanted to engage with that kind of book, and I don't have it, it sounds amazing, but I don't have it, so I don't know. Maybe I'd want to delve into more. Ooh, you find this particular root, but often, I mean, you could still have them. They could work in conjunction where you have sort of a named thing versus this, like the 500 gold piece diamond versus generic materia. So I could still have my cake and eat it too, in a sense of having mandrake be something really special, and that would be kind of a name specific ingredient, and then having stuff like and 3 materia. Or if I don't want to use mandrake and I'm like, it's not that, as I always like to say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's like, okay, just materia. Hey, no, Sorian says it's a cool world, even better concept. Forging around, you can find some magic herb. Right. And then, and again, you could roll dice and figure out what kind of magic herb it is. You could do all that stuff. I'm not really worried about that right now. It's more like what I'd be more interested maybe in is finding a formula. Well, I have a formula for healing, healing whatever. And the other thing I was thinking about is it could be something too where you roll for your materia. So you have all this stuff in your component bag, and then to use a Fellowship of the Ring kind of thing, at least in the movie. I don't remember how it plays out exactly in the book, but Frodo's been stabbed at Weathertop, and Aragorn is tending to him, and Sam, is there, and Aragorn says to Sam, find me some Athelas, right? Find me some whatever the name, King's foil, I think is the other term. And at that point, in this kind of situation, maybe I have Sam roll some dice, depending on how much materia they have, and if they roll and succeed in whatever, then inside their little component pouch, the little materia bag, they've got King's foil. If not, they can go out and forge for it. Like, that's another way I was thinking it might work if we wanted to deal with specific things, right? Because I do like the specificity sometimes, but it can be a lot to maintain. So I like kind of having the abilities, like, it just be generic, or I can be specific, and it'll kind of work either way. Um, Brian Smith says, "What are we crafting?" Um, Not really craft. Oh, wait, we crafted. No, I wouldn't say crafting. I'm not going so far. I mean, I definitely put things like potions and these kind of single use consumable things on a different thing than crafting. Like I'm making my own plate mail today. I don't have nearly as much of a issue. I don't want to say issue. It's not right. I don't mind or I don't have a dislike for the crafting of those kinds of things than I do for like I'm making magical weapons now in my spare time. That kind of thing is where I more have you know that I find a little bit stretches things for me. Produce or maintain a fire. Is there a word for like fire as a? 'Cause I was trying to look this up before I couldn't find it for fire as a. I don't mean fire like in a furnace. I mean like a campfire, but yeah. I always go think, well, it could be a campfire, but it could also be something else. Like, is there a term for that? I don't know. Probably not. Well, I say that there probably is, but anyway, in this case, we're talking about campfires or any kind of fire, fiery fires, but not. I suppose it would work in a. Aren't you going to keep that in there? Supposed to keep that all together, right? You change the way you're doing things. You did. Thought before when I moved a group, it would move it all together. Now you're not moving it together. I do it now. Are you moving it all together? No, you're not. Ah, MeWe or Ouija, not MeWe. What are you doing to me? Okay, so we got. Well, I just got to put materia in here, and then we'll have that kind of set. So the reason why I wanted to bring the resources out because I wanted to. When I'm looking at this foraging thing, that's why you see supply, which I need to change to provisions, and materia in here become that it's that kind of like if I'm talking about it, I gotta have the terms basically called magical components. Small consumable magical components. Ryan Smith's formula equal known spells in 5e lingo. I didn't know that. That's cool. I was just using formulas because I'm trying to keep it open for whatever thing it is. Okay. So we got travel, which is moving across the terrain. I don't like this color. Can I do a different color? Maybe yellow. Maybe that's better. Travel, moving across terrain. We've got so this is the other thing. So now going back to what I was doing originally before I had to go. So I had as my actions right now. So assuming that we're abstracting out the actions we're doing in the wilderness, similar to foraging, right? I don't want what are the things if we're on expedition? By expedition, I mean that kind of overland travel. I'm calling it an expedition, overland travel, extended overland travel somewhere. What are the things, what are the kind of actions we're taking? And in particular, I mean ones that are not, we don't really want to, or there isn't a need to zoom in and play it out. The ones that come up, and I'll probably use some flavor of them, are you take on the role. This is something that, what was it called? It was the One Ring does it, and also if you have the fifth edition version of One Ring, this is the original one. It was in that book, then they moved it to another book, or I don't know. There's whatever, but it was you could be sort of you could be navigating, you could be kind of on an Overwatch, you could be something else. There was like a couple different roles, and that's kind of similar to this because you might think like, oh, I'm going to role play out Overwatch, where you're basically running security, but that only really comes up if you see something. You're not going to keep asking the guy, "Are you still looking around?" And the person doing it is going to say, "I'm looking around," and they're not, and that's going to be it for the time, right? So we're not really interested in getting into the nitty gritty moment by moment of this person watching the horizon. You see trees, and then more trees. Now the trees are a little bit smaller. Now they're a little bit bigger, and there's dappled sunlight. That's great at first, but it's like that's not what we're gonna do. So we're zooming out and saying, okay, we're only gonna really you're on the watch. And then if something happens, something happens. If not, but you're on the watch. And that's kind of the same way I feel about foraging. All right, you're going off to forage. If something happens, you either find something or you don't find something, or something bad happens to you, then we're going to cover it. Otherwise, you're assumed just to be gone for those few hours, and then you'll come back, or maybe assuming you're not lost, that kind of thing. And so travel is like that, right? Where if something happens, we're going to talk about it. Otherwise, you're going to either get to a decision point, or at least a continuance point, or an obstacle, or whatnot. Otherwise, we're going to assume that yes, you are traveling, and you don't need to tell me. We don't need to spend hours on me asking you if you're still putting one foot in front of the other. Right. So we got foraging. Now, the reason why I was thinking foraging being separate from hunting is they are kind of different. But is that difference between hunting and foraging enough? And I don't know. I don't know. I think you could easily make an argument it's just resupply one way or another. And then even because and I go back and forth because you go, okay, but if I'm hunting, I'm looking for animals, so I'm most likely to find animal things or run into animals, even or monsters or something like that, because I'm actively looking for them. I'm looking for trails. I'm trying, if I'm hunting for food, right, I'm going to be doing all the things that are going to be getting me into. I'm going to be deliberately trying to get into areas where I think there is animal activity, and that means all kinds of things going on, which is different than I'm looking for berries and things like that. But then at the same time, I think, well, but if I'm looking for berries, I probably am also kind of looking for tracks because I'm looking for stuff that's edible. I might want to see where the animals are going to graze because that may be, if I follow the deer, maybe I'll get to where the berries are, kind of thing. I don't know enough about foraging to know. I also don't know that much about hunting, to be honest. So I go back and forth whether it should just be kind of like either one. Right now, I have them sort of separate, but I haven't even gone through and defined hunting like I have this one. So maybe it would be about the same because at the end of the day, right? I don't care about, I don't care about, I don't care about the nature of the provision that's being found. I only care they're finding provisions. I'm not going to worry about. Did I call it tracks? Still, I did call it tracks. I'm not going to worry about like the expiration date, or is it protein versus vegetable? I don't care that much. If it becomes important, then you can always add that in, part of that kind of rulings bit, right? If it becomes really important that they're eating protein or they're not, or they're in some fairy kingdom where they've been told you can get whatever you want from the lands, but you're not, do not shoot the king's deer kind of thing, then it may be more important to know what they're doing. But mechanically, behind the screen at least, it may not matter at all. They're going to do stuff. Howard Hughes says anyone who thinks foraging is easy hasn't had to whittle a gooseberry call out in the woods. Oh, I have no doubt that it's not easy at all. They're just different. And to my mind, they're different skills. Whether we need different mechanics, different procedures for the different skills is really the question. Because you make an argument, it's they're the same. In terms of mechanically, you're going out, you're probably trying again. My assumption for foraging, and maybe I just need to read more about foraging. But even then, it's that also thing like it's a game. I'm okay if it's not. So much stuff in our games does not really model onto the real world. Even when we think it doesn't really. Things aren't usually as cut and dried, simple. Everything's complicated. Everything is different than we imagine it is. Do I need separate hunting, foraging kind of tables and things, or is it just a matter of if you're foraging and you have a forager's skill or background, you'll get helped on that. If you have a hunter's background, you'll get helped on hunting. Maybe your items come in handy if you're hunting. Presumably, in those days, you're using a bow or spear for the most part. I don't know. Trapping would be a whole other one. Do we need one thing for trapping? Like maybe it's just the actual. The players will describe which one of these they're doing, but the actuality is behind the scenes. It's all using this sort of whatever single mechanic. I'm talking myself into it. I'm talking myself into having basically a generic foraging, hunting, foraging, hunting, trapping. I would the thing is with trapping, I always felt like it's someone if someone's a trapper out there, let me know if I'm out of line. I always thought the thing with trapping was that it just takes longer. I mean, I know hunting can take all day or multiple days. I know. And foraging, I'm sure the same. But I feel like it could take that long or it could happen really quickly. My feeling always was with trapping is that the whole procedure of trapping is you're setting a trap and then you are waiting some second of time and then coming back to it. So I don't know if I'm on a moving expedition if trapping is going to be that much because we're moving. Like, you might say I'm going to spend 3 hours out hunting. If I find something, I find something. If I don't, I don't. Then I'm going to come back. That's fine. But with a trap, I think like it's usually like days. You set the trap out one day, then you come back the next day or even the day after that. And the nice thing with traps is once you've got one, if it's not if it hasn't been triggered some way, you can leave it. Right? You just kind of got to go through and sort of check them and see if they've been triggered or not. But so they sort of in a way they kind of it's like this initial effort, assuming you have the traps, you don't have to create them all. But I don't know, some traps seem to be fairly simple. I mean, if assuming you know kind of how to do things, not simple for me. But it has a longer sort of in built-in time frame to it than hunting or foraging. Because you get lucky and find something 10 minutes later. Like, "Oh, I found some. Okay, great." I don't think you're gonna get lucky with the trap. I mean, I don't think that's even you're not even lucky with the trap might be coming back the next day and finding it sprung, or from the morning to the evening, not within an hour. But as I mentioned, I am not I am not at all knowledgeable on really any of these. Another reason to keep it simple. Okay. So the reason why so one of the things I was thinking about, and this actually may I've kind of obviated the need for this. I was gonna link these things together in terms of what you could find if you were hunting, trapping, or whatever. But it seems like at this point, all these things are gonna right. They're all gonna come to resupply, which actually works fine. Um, I think that works well. So then the other actions I was gonna have, right, is to be setting camp, which is not just the finding and preparing a campsite. And this is one that I've tried role playing it out, and I just don't find it very fruitful because everyone's going to say things like, "Well, I'd like one as safe as possible. Oh, I'd like one as near to this or near to that." Like, and then I'll narrate out a spot, but it just comes down to like, was this the best spot we could find, or is this like, is there, And so with this action, having it as an action means that I can at the time, and then when I describe, I say, okay, this is what you found. This is it. This is the best, or these are the conditions that you have. Um, so yes, that is what you've got. Yes, that is the kind of the best. And like I said, I just didn't find it. And again, I'd love to hear people's experiences with that. And then the other times when I've played, usually it's just kind of like you find a campsite, okay, you're camping, kind of thing, and there's nothing really done about it at all. There's it's not really detailed at all. Um, and sometimes I actually wish it was a little bit more detailed than it ends up being. If there's an encounter or something, sometimes like, oh, I thought we would have camped with our backs to the rocks or something, and then the GM's like, you didn't find any rocks. Like, okay, well, we didn't really know what we found, or we didn't found because we said we just looked for a camping site as safe as possible, and then you said, great, you've got one, and we didn't really get into what we have or we not. Whereas with the action, taking the action, we can roll some dice, we can integrate whatever skills, systems, or whatnot we can use, and then we can literally go down the list and say, okay, you got this, that, the other, or you didn't, and then it's kind of set. So I kind of like that, but let me know what your experiences have been as usual with these things. We definitely have. I almost feel like the other things like watching and things, do I need that as an action? It's really more just a function of almost that surprise roll. I don't know, but I'll put it in here. Well, there's navigating, right? Or now, should I say navigation? Would be one, which would be, let's see, what would, I don't know, determining position and direction of travel, which is important. Are there any actions I'm missing? Are any ones that I'm not thinking of in here? I know there's the kind of Overwatch. I'll put. I guess I'll put. Oh, I don't know. I'll just call it Overwatch for right now. Lookout, maybe better one. I suppose. Yeah, security. The thing is like security against that thing that's only going to come up with something. I mean, I guess it works. I'm just wondering, like, what is the? Because some of these, I'm wondering. I'm trying to tie in a little bit to. So, for example, we have. Let's just make another thing here. So we will have. Let's call it. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure what. I'm going to be vague because I'm not sure what these are going to look like. But um, let's see. What am I like? Backgrounds, jobs, hunters. So you might have hunter. Might have. I don't know, right? Like navigator kind of thing. And I'll just what do we call these? Oops. Oh, you're not. What are you doing to me? Oh, I'm holding on the wrong thing. We'll call these, I don't know, sort of backgrounds, skill sets, sort of thing, right? So we'll have this. What does that do? Oh, change type. Okay. And we'll give this a, no, we'll give this a color, or what do we have here? We'll call it, oh, that's a nice, what a nice color, right? So we've got something like this. Adept at hunting, skilled at navigating. So you can see how you could take these and you might naturally say, okay, the navigator, yep, navigation, great. Hunter, stop doing that, please. Yep, resupply. And I'm fine having overlap. If we had hunter and someone else wanted to be a trapper, miner, woodsman, you could have a bunch of things come in. So now what would be for a security type thing? What would be it? Like what does security look like? What does security look like? And what would there be a background that might make you more or less good at security? Like what would we I mean, yes, there's I suppose you could have, if you had a background of caravan guard, then I guess you'd be good at security. But what does that actually entail? Like what does it mean? Right? Like what decisions, what things are we doing? Because I feel like you could just put anybody with a pair of decent eyes you could look at. Because you're not when you're looking at, you're not looking for a particular thing. You're looking just for things kind of, I don't know, out of the norm. So I would guess that the secure if you're gonna have the person on lookout, they just can't be, I guess, a somnambulist. Someone's gonna fall asleep on the watch, or I mean, obviously that they're not blind, or or what. So I am trying to look at kind of what are these other things that kind of feed in that could potentially be, class stuff or whatever. Like what could be some good things in there. And I don't know if I feel like lookouts that kind of thing where like anybody could do or like, sometimes they'll have like, oh, you're the quartermaster. And it's like that's great. I mean, I guess there's someone's got a quartermaster, but I don't know. It feels like that's just almost feel like that's a job that anybody could do. It's like, well, here, give it to Bob. Like the last kid picked on the team. Oh, what are you do? Bob. Yeah, no, 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 no. Look, we got plenty of important stuff for you, Bob. Bob, you're gonna have the most important job of all, quartermaster. Oh, Bob, if you're not watching our food, we'll starve. So get your pencil ready, Bob. And when we say we've eaten one meal, subtract that meal from the total. It is imperative, Bob. You are the most important person on this trip. Yeah, not really. Howard Hughes says, I think it encapsulates identifying secure camp locations, managing watch, taking care of the camp materials, ensuring they are safe to use. Sure, but I guess that does make sense, but that encapsulates too many jobs. I don't want the one job encapsulating everything because I have, I mean, taking care of camp materials. I guess there's the other thing is so there's a couple things here. So I'll in case you're not following the chat, I'll put this up here. So maybe I should stick myself here. So um, Howard says, or actually maybe over here better. Here, here. Oh, I don't want to be on. Whoop. I'll be there for a minute. Howard makes the great point of it encapsulates identifying secure camp locations, managing launch, taking care of the camp materials, materials are safe. So the issue I have with this, not really an issue. It's merely that these are a bunch of things. Managing watch. I mean, are you the person that sets who's watching when? I guess that's fine, but I come from a place where we usually will set up a standard operating procedure kind of thing. So once we've set up who in generically takes up watches, we don't tend to do that over and over again. Maybe we would get to a point where there would be some reason why we're changing we're changing our mode, but like that's a one time kind of deal. And sometimes you want to change it anyway for various reasons. Like, oh, the wizard wants to memorize their spells, so I can do it now, later, whatever. Hey, fellowship, welcome. So I don't know the needs one. And then taking care of the camp materials. I don't find that accounting is super fun. I don't know if that stuff comes up where someone really is putting that at risk. Maybe there are games where people also like, oh my gosh, I'm going to roll some dice and otherwise all the food's been despoiled. Maybe. And then I have the kind of camping part. Um, Maybe that would be like I feel like that would also be under kind of hunter, woodsman, anybody who's going to be any of those jobs ended up being out in the woods or in the wilderness for an extended period of time, like trappers, woodsmen, that kind of thing. I feel like could do the camp part. So it's good. It might be something that might things like again, it might be a game thing. It might be if you have 3 players or you have 6 players. If you have 3 players, maybe you give somebody kind of security detail, which wraps a few things because they're doing a few things. Or of course, at that point, maybe you're saying, well, we're going to have a bunch of hirelings taking up things that we think are unimportant, that kind of thing. Perhaps security is in charge of the setting camp action. Could be. But what would that like in a fantasy sense? What would that be? Like, what is security? Right? Security is pretty modern. You have guards. You have, if you're, you might be someone's house guard. You might be someone's in their, army. You might be a soldier. I mean, soldiers, I could definitely see as having a. Actually, that's not a bad idea. So soldiers, I could see because that's definitely something you do. At least the Romans and whatever they seem to be very definitely having their soldiers build camps. I presume. I know that it wasn't exactly the same in kind of a later sense. Solidars, guild at organized warfare. So certainly on campaign. They would have they would be good at setting up camp. So yeah, thanks, Howard Hughes. I like that. I'm not sure if that's precisely what you meant by security, but that's what I'm going to take it as. So I like that. Yeah. So the better camp, right? So Howard Hughes mentions back to my original explanation, finding a better place for camp where you may get a bonus for keeping watch. Yeah. So the better you do at the camp, right, would be yes, you're more hidden. So anything something trying to find you. So let's say you're hiding from orcs. If you're able to find a better spot, that's going to be harder for them to find you. That would also equate to with smaller chance of a wandering monster. You know, if you're rolling one for the night, you have a better chance of not having something come because you're there. It would be advantageous to things like finding potentially because I know one of the things when I read and I did it on stream a while back, didn't read all of it. We read some kind of excerpts from it. It was a book called Bushcraft. And Bushcraft talked about the important one, Bushcraft stressed the importance of finding and establishing good campsites. It made me really think about it as much more as a throwaway thing, not something I want to play out, but something that I want to make more significant. So I like having it as an action. Like it's going to take up a while to find this campsite, but what this campsite can do is can really be a base of operations because you want it to be kind of close to things like water, right? But off of close to water, not sitting on a game trail, finding that kind of thing, potentially being close to other food sources. So if you find a good, so part of my idea is if you have a really good campsite and you do that first. So let's say you're traveling through an area and it's like, man, it's we're we're running a little bit low on resources. We're doing things we're not gonna push through, and this area seems to be fertile, and we can kind of we might need to resupply and get some before we move into areas. Let's say we're going across a mountain range or some hills, something else that's kind of nasty later on. Like, we need to do something. So you make a really good campsite. It's going to make your other things easier. It's going to make finding those that foraging or whatever that resupply easier because part of finding the campsite is finding places that are nearby to things like potable water and those kinds of things. It's going to be protected as much as it can be given the environment stuff, right? You can't do everything, but if there's no caves, you can't camp in a cave, but you can do the best that you can. All those kinds of things. So I want to kind of emphasize that spending time to try to camp. Other points are where towns are likely to form over time. People are traveling and they find a really good spot that's really close to all that stuff that the idea that they might form a town there would probably be good, right? I think mostly when we're doing these kinds of expeditions or campaigning is you're kind of going out in the wilderness. So they're, but yeah, I mean, certainly if you're looking at if you're the players and you're looking at, we've found this place we want to clear out and make our home spot, then yeah, finding that spot would be good. Um, but I'm probably not concerned about the town part of it because if there's a town there, then that obviates a lot of problems. If oh hey, there's a town, but yeah, it would. I think it was something you could use if you were going to go from kind of this kind of actions to that sort of domain actions of good, finding the best point to establish someplace that's going to become a stronghold or a town. Then yeah, you want something close to water, something near the most uh, fruitful parts of the land. That's where the animals are. That's also probably going to be best for planting crops or herding, whatever. Like, yeah, that's going to be where you want to put it. Um, I would think that if I was doing it on a domain level, like and not on the travel, because this stuff's kind of what you're doing. I imagine anyway, kind of as you're moving. I want to have some other kind of action that would be different, which might be like surveying. Whereas you're sending out a survey and you're trying to get kind of a really detailed, like here's where everything is, because there might be multiple good resupply points, but one of them is the best. And when you're just looking for a place to camp, you're probably just going to, oh well, this one's good. I don't need to go find 8 of them and compare all 8 because we don't have that kind of time. But if you're surveying, you're theoretically you're going to have that much time, and hopefully you've also cleared out the place so that you can pretty much walk unimpeded to these spots and not get attacked by owl bears or demons or anything like that. Fellowship says I just got done a world building session thinking about trade routes and where they would cause towns to form. So I'm thinking in that direction. Yeah, no, totally. It makes sense. It makes sense. I always think with the first places, the towns or places are going to form are like rivers and things like that, right? Because they allow for such easy travel. They potentially have food built into them and and fish, and then animals are also going to show up there because it's water to drink, and it's gonna So I always think about, well, where's the water, and then go there first, and then probably if the land is decent around the water, then towns will theoretically spring up following that water course. And then, of course, the water is such an easy way to move up and down without having to do the work. You don't even need the animals. You just get on the water and use wind, or use sail, or combination of both, or you sail, use the current, flow down one way. Maybe you can sail back or row back. It makes a lot of sense. That's kind of where I think about. But and I'm sure that's true often in our world. There's other times where, for reasons of whatever, it's not true. Because there's also like religious stuff. Like sometimes stuff is put somewhere because it has a special significance, and that significance trumps the fact that it's inconvenient to have a place there. And then they just figure out. So you might. So I think whenever you have these kind of rules, you might want to think about exceptions to them. Delphi, where they put the Oracle. I don't know what's near it. It might be in a really great spot, but it had this kind of significance, and the significance didn't matter about whether it was really great for food or trade or anything. It's like it's here because this is where the gods deemed it to be. Therefore, it's going to be here, and we're just going to have to figure out how to truck food back and forth or do whatever. Like I said, I don't know. There's situations. Um, but yeah, as Fellowship says, lots of good things to think about. Absolutely. Swig of tea there. And I'm not saying that I need to have a background for every action, but I just like to think about it. Those little rewards you can give somebody. Hey, you got a hunter background. Great. Well, you're slightly better at resupply than not. So, so I think as a player, I think when you have those little, I don't even want to call them perks because they might even not even be that strong, or it might be very situational, right? The hunter in many situations, having that little background might not do much, because I'm not going to have it. It's not going to be like, Hunter, you're better at fighting than a fighter. No, you're not. Um, but you could say to somebody, well, hey, in this aspect of the game, you're going to get this little, you're going to be a little bit better. That makes you feel better. Whether you're a hunter and you are a fighter, whether you're a hunter and you're a magic user, or you're a hunter and you're a thief, like whatever you are. Like it's just like, hey, it's like this little perk. So I kind of like to think about, you have these actions, and maybe they kind of flow into these other things, and that way you can also think of it this way. Well, I want to make up a certain class, or a player's asking me, can I have a class? Assuming you're using classes, and I'm like, well, look at it. Maybe you're keen-eyed. You're one of you have eagle eyes. Ooh, what does eagle eyes do? Well, it means that when you're on lookout, and maybe color, you're like, you have a better chance of this, and when you're on lookout, you have a better chance of observing threats. Oh, great! Just it's like a little, I don't know, a little gift. Gift is kind of too strong, maybe a too strong word. I don't know. Just a little something, something. Fellowship says, I like the idea of giving PC a +1 bonus for rolls in a very specific situation. Yeah, especially if you can, not to say that you can't double up. And I'm fine with there being overlap of, like, because something you're probably going to have more. We start looking at all the lists of occupations and things, you're going to tend to have some overlap, especially unless you're drilling down deep into it, right? Oh, a hunter versus a trapper. Yes, their skill sets are kind of different, but when you just break out sort of generically what they're doing, like, well, the hunter, okay, tracking. Hunter's got to be good at tracking. Yeah, but trapper's got to be good at tracking too. Different reasons, but they got to be, whereas the hunter might be finding tracks to find the game where they are right now. The trapper's trying to find tracks leading them to where they think the prey either lives, so they can put a trap outside a burrow or something, or maybe where they're likely to go. And I don't know how big. I tend to think of traps being more small game. Maybe I know they're pit. You can do pit traps if you have the time, I suppose. Whatever, but you can see how these generic actions you could look at and say there's a lot of overlap there between them. I'm okay with that, but I like the idea that you're a soldier and you might not think of camping as something you get. And I'm not giving you a bonus to hit because you're a soldier because that's going to be part of your main class. But I can say that there are certain things that a soldier might give you, and one of those might be you're good at setting up camps because you've done that. You've been out on campaigns, military campaigns, and so you are good at setting up camps. And that makes it. I feel like that makes that person maybe feel a little bit better about being a soldier. And some of the other things that they might get might not come up very often. This might not come up very often either. But yeah, it's another kind of little some situational things that they get. Howard Hughes says 4 bars, build it here. Are you talking? It's funny. And Howard Hughes said 4 bars, and I wasn't sure whether he was talking about cell signal or literally bars, as in like there are clubs here. I'm guessing me. So so I missed it before that. So it was Philadelphia was the spot with the best reception. Oh yeah, totally. We've been watching the what is it called now? It's that show. It's on Disney Plus. It was based on those books that were that the movies they had these earlier movies. Percy Jackson, and they kind of have a deal like that where I was actually just watching an episode. And they're using some kind of crystal thing, and so they had to use a crystal to like get a signal, and then they got to throw an ancient coin in. It's like a payphone. They're using payphones of a sort, but it kind of made me think of the same thing. So Howard Hughes, if the lore of the Percy Jackson TV show and maybe the books holds true, that literally might be the case why Delphi is where. Well, I know that's technically not true. Technically, Delphi apparently was Zeus sent out 2 birds, 2 ravens, or something said fly around the earth, and Delphi is where they crossed. But I like the reception idea, and certainly Percy Jackson plays with that a bit. Not a terrible show. Also, I didn't read the books. Just because of my daughter, and I'm trying to engage my daughter more with like mythology and tales and things like that. So I kind of want to be like, yeah, let's watch it. Okay, I feel like the show's better, having them a little bit more room to breathe. I'm assuming they get to bring in more stuff from the books. The stories kind of doesn't make sense to me. I mean, the premise just seems off. Maybe it's the way of thinking. Like, so the idea, and it's I'm not spoiling anything. It's the same thing in the movie, which is, and they had a couple of movies, and I'm talking about the first movie. So that this series, this season, which is the first season of the show, seems to cover the same ground as the first Percy Jackson movie. Someone stole the Zeus's master bolt, which I guess is the bolt from which all the other lightning bolts you might throw at you are cloned from or grown from. I don't know. It's the template, whatever. Yeah, it got stolen, and of course Zeus is pissed. And there's this whole right. And it's fun. Like, look, all credit to him. He's a best-selling author. He sold millions of copies of these books. But I guess there's this whole thing with the gods not. So they have this thing of like the Percy Jackson. All these kids are demigods. They're the sons and daughters of the gods and mortals. That's kind of their shtick. And there's this whole thing like the gods don't really interact with the kids. I think that's like something bad happened to a kid, and now they just I think that's what it is. But maybe there's some kind of I don't know they're doing, but it doesn't really hold up because whereas like some gods don't seem to want to, other gods will show up and start like it's I don't know. There's a bunch about it where maybe the books would make it seem a little bit more sense. There's probably stuff that I'm missing context and whatnot from there, maybe. But it is fun in that it's kind of what I like about it is it makes those myths kind of interesting in a way that my daughter might engage with when she might not have been particularly interested in kind of the original versus the myths. Maybe when she gets older, she might be more interested in like the myths as they were. But this kind of reframing and making it kind of more of a living modern kind of thing. It's fun and it's kind of fun, cute, whatever to see. Like, oh well, what would this thing kind of be, but in a modern context? Because they don't do like what Wonder Woman did, where the her I forget whatever her peoples, the Amazons, was she an Amazon, whatever she was, and it's like it's the exact same as it was thousands of years ago. They kind of just sat there in stasis while everything else has happened. In this one, it posits a much more sense of what am I trying to say here? Kind of evolving their world, or at least how maybe not Olympus and kind of the divine side of it, but they in our world are kind of have evolved with us. Have they haven't stayed. They're not still wearing walking around in togas and sandals. They're like Aries riding a motorcycle kind of thing. Like you can like the image or not, but at least it's like, oh, okay, well they're sort of they're acknowledging that yes, thousands of years have passed, kind of whatnot. Anybody else watching Percy Jackson either with themselves, their kids? It's not the greatest show, and I don't love the precocious youths and the Percy Jackson actor this time. I don't know. I don't love him, but he's fine. Like that's more me, right? I'm not in the I'm not I'm not in the he's not supposed to really be appealing to me. It's more for like my daughter and younger folk, which is great. But it's totally I do think it's watchable, though it's more watchable having a child that you're watching it with, or young adult, young person that you're watching it with. Okay, so we got this stuff going on. So on foraging, I was trying to come up. So here's a couple things. So I'm the system that I'm using for these is is a dice pool system where you're rolling potentially multiple dice. You might just be rolling one die, but there's chances you can be rolling multiple dice. And what I had on this list was you could see it's a six, right? I got six things on here. So I haven't decided exactly what I want to do. One idea was just you roll a d6 and notice that these last two are not foraging things, but they're important in terms of the hex because a location I'm working on that kind of three-level hex location, basically a landmark, then I call them tracks, which are sort of a landmark, a secret, and then a certain amount of kind of clues, cues. Right now I have them as tracks. I might change that. I thought I had actually changed it, but now I don't remember. I might have to look that up and see if it's on another note. But they kind of lead you towards the secret. And the secret could be anything. Could be a lair, could be a ruin. It's just something like if the landmark is a thing that anybody living around there is going to know about, like, oh yeah, the hanging rock, oh the waterfall, oh the whatever. That's the thing that everybody kind of knows. Doesn't necessarily mean that you could see it from a great distance, but if you live around there, you know about it. It's like that's the thing you know. It's kind of thing that's like, oh, well, this however many miles of woodlands in this hex, what separates it from the so many miles of woodlands next door? It's that there's something here. It could be a natural thing, could be a something that was constructed, but it's the kind of thing that people know if they've lived around here at all, right? If they've been around here at all, you're probably going to run into it. That's the kind of thing your landmark is. Then the secret is something that you got to kind of go and find. It is either like a lair or something of that nature where it's kind of secret by design. They want their lair. They don't want people, you want to put a lair somewhere where you know where it is and nobody else does. So it's kind of a secret. Or it could be a secret by kind of accident. There was a mighty tower here, but then the tower fell down and the trees grew over it. And so nothing remains, but there's more underground. And that's kind of there's stuff down there. But from the surface, you can barely, barely, barely see it. And even then, only when you kind of fall on top of it, kind of thing. That's would be another way for the secret. And the tracks are kind of those clues that if you follow them would lead you towards that thing. So if you had the tower that fell down and scattered, at some point, if there was a tower there, I assume, I don't know why there wouldn't be some kind of path or something leading a road, maybe depending on the importance of the tower, that might lead from somewhere to the tower. I mean, even if it's only the people in the tower using it to leave and go get stuff, they would make some kind of trail. So a track could be finding that trail. It might be something else, like maybe you find a boundary marker and you're like, huh, why is there a boundary marker here? Therefore, I'm either entering out of something or I'm entering into something. And anyway, it can be in a sense, maybe a clue is better because but it's going to be something that might lead you to think, I'm on the right track, right? Haven't found the lost city of Z, but we found a boundary marker, and I am sure that somewhere beyond this boundary marker, the lost city of Z surely must be. It's that kind of thing to help press you on. So on these things where you're foraging, hunting, whatever, if you do really well, I might have it where these kind of are additive. So maybe you get something and you get these that if you do kind of really well, you're not only going to maybe find this thing, but you're going to find this other thing that is helpful beyond your original task. So one way I thought I was thinking about was like you roll dice, but also since I have a dice pool, the other thing I could do was be additive. So, like, oh, you get one success, you find one provision. Oh, two successes, you find this. Three, four, five, six. So you would sort of you could the more dice you can get means the more kind of things you will find. And I'm kind of leaning towards that. I think because I like the idea of encouraging folks to try to get as much fill those dice pools as much as they can to to do something, and then you get more rewards for doing well on those checks. So that was my thought there. Um, I don't know what you folks think, but that was kind of what I was doing with that. Uh, let's see. Did I have? Oh yeah, and I did write up some things about tracks. Oh yeah, and I called it low, like a locus, loci. What plural for locus is loci. I think I just wanted. I felt like locations. I try to find words. Something about finding different words is that they. Oh, there you go. You start using when you use them. So one nice thing about finding I don't want to say unique word, but you're finding a technical word, finding some kind of word that's a little bit off the beaten path, is that you can define it and not necessarily worry about it showing up everywhere. So if I use locations, I feel like I have to think more about anytime I might stumble on that saying that word, am I talking about locations the thing, or am I talking about locations the formal thing, or am I talking about informal locations? And then you can do something like, well, I'm going to use capital L versus lowercase l. I might do that anyway. Okay, okay, well, whatever. But if I use a locus, I know that I'm probably not going to throw around locus all the time as a word. So I know if I just use loci or loci and locus for these kinds of specific formally formalized locations, then I'm free to use location wherever I want. I've got this other word that's kind of in there. That was kind of why I picked materia as a thing, as I wanted a word like, well, what kind of word can cover these kind of weird, magic-y sort of things? But I'm not going to be using it in other contexts really. So that I can, if I use materia, I know I can say that specific thing. Whereas if I use a different word, maybe it shows up in other things. Whatever, I got to be more careful about using it. I don't know if that makes sense, but well, I kind of like to try to find those sorts of words a little bit off the beaten path, a little bit like, oh, okay, this is a little something, so I can use it. So that's where that is. And so and basically the tracks and loci, I just kind of wrote down tracks, paths or other trails lead to a locus. A locus is a key location. Oh, sign is what it was. Sorry, tracks. Yes, landmark, sign, or secret. I hadn't gone through writing those up yet, but that's it. So I hopefully what I'm trying to do is come up with this kind of procedure for hexes that integrates a bunch of stuff. I know a lot of people like the 4-hour time frames, like 4-hour like wilderness turns or outdoor survival turns. I don't know, but I'm actually leaning towards 3 hours. I think 3 hours. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being different. I just like it a little bit better. I mean, they end up, that they break down essentially the same. It's just you get an extra couple of actions with the 3-hour windows versus the 4-hour windows. Um, I don't know if people have preferences, but I kind of like the 3-hour windows. So all these actions basically would take up the 3-hour windows. So setting camp is not just like at the end of the because some people like at the end of travel you set up camp for free. Like I'm not giving you that. Wrong answer. You're gonna have to spend time doing it, but it's like I said, for me, my system, I'm emphasizing this is a key step. Not something you give away for free. It's not something you take for granted. It's kind of a key step. So it's taking important. All these other ones, obviously, another reason why some of these are a little bit funky because some of these you can kind of do while you're traveling, and other ones you have to do by themselves. You can't really resupply while you're traveling. You can't set up camp while you're traveling. You can navigate while you're traveling. You can look out. Obviously, you're going to be tending to look out while you're traveling, and obviously, you're traveling, so you're traveling. Quarter mastering. If I end up adding that in there, um, I mean, maybe there's something like it's not really an action, but it's a role. That might not make sense, right? Difference between an action and a role. Because I think with a role, it's kind of like if you put somebody in charge of it, maybe you get some little bonus. I don't know. I'm trying to think like when it would come up. Like, could you? What would you want to do with quarter? So here's a good question to ask. If we were going to have a quartermaster action, we'll throw it in there for right now, just for giggles. We'll throw in quartermaster, which would essentially be managing resources. We're going to put it right. That's what the quartermaster does. So one, I'm not sure what backgrounds or skill sets that aren't like I was a quartermaster would be good for a quartermaster. I'm sure we could come up with ones. It might be like maybe working in a tavern could do it for you. Right? I'd be happy to be kind of broad with that. I mean, you could go back to soldier because that's something that soldiers have to do to manage. Or maybe there's another role. Maybe you have soldier and something else. I don't know. Uh, kind of thing. No one says I like to use 3 hour blocks of time because it equates to 8 blocks in a standard day. Yeah, that's kind of my thinking. No one, you're on the same wavelength as me. I just like it a little bit better. I like the extra block of time. Um, I feel like then it feels right to me. Some of these actions taking up 3 hours. I don't know when I push to 4 hours, it starts to feel like is that a little bit too long? I'm sure the guy who wrote Bushcraft probably say no, it's not. But I think 3 hours just sounds good. Sounds like, and also I'm leaning towards 3 mile hexes because I like using. So one something that I've enjoyed doing in the past is using measurements like leagues and furlongs and things like that as opposed to miles. I mean, miles is all not miles too, but and the reason I like them is because I feel like they help shake players out of the sort of either seeking out or expecting the kind of modern accuracy. So if I say it's 3 miles a day, that might 3 miles away. That might give them a very specific understanding, right or wrong, of say the time it takes to get there, the speed or the distance or something like that. If I say leagues, that's a little bit fuzzy. They'll do the math. Oh yeah, it's 3 leagues to a mile, right? But it's just a little bit. But now I can also say, well, it's approximately 3 leagues to a mile, that kind of thing. I just like that it just a little bit more in the mood a little bit. To me, it just adds a little bit to the atmosphere of like you're in a different time and a different place and a different world. And this world is one that the kind of GPS and specificity we don't have. You don't have a phone that you don't know exactly how long. And so when I was thinking about that and looking at these different things, but for the longest time I was just doing like two, oh, it's 2 leagues. But then I thought, why am I doing 2 leagues? Feels like shouldn't it should be one league and I can have one league a hex? Doesn't that make kind of more sense? And I don't mind if it's now like, well, you could see like to the end of 2 hexes. Was like I was like, oh, maybe I'll just do that. So I've been thinking about going to 3 mile kind of hexes for that reason. RU says, how long are we staying in this trail? Not a furlong. Yeah. Um, I like that stuff, and I like how I think anyway. It just kind of shakes folks a little bit out of their modern mindset. But then you kind of get in sort of open ground. You have sort of 3 hours of time, 3 miles. It's probably be like the thing I liked about the 6 mile hex is what I had kind of like 6 miles in a 3 hour window if you're on kind of flat open ground, which worked well. So now it would be kind of instead of one hex, it would be 2 hexes. Um, but that's kind of how I'm leaning. But I might go. Yeah, I might change my mind tomorrow. You know, I could easily find myself with my mind changed. Let's see. I don't think I've gotten any texts yet. I don't know where my family is. Oh, wait a minute. Is there a text? Nope. Oh, I got some junk mail. Okay. So before the last thing I want to talk about something kind of completely different, but I had some more like realizations. This my mind was working today. I don't know. Seems like a lot of times it's not, but it was working today. So these are generic. This stuff here, this kind of track stuff. This is kind of generic hex crawl procedures for anybody, any game, right? Or whatever, any fantasy kind of game, OSR type game, something you could plug and play into kind of any system you'd want to if you weren't satisfied with what they had or if they didn't have a system at all. That's kind of what this stuff is. I also am kind of putting together my own kind of set of rules that's going to be sort of my house system. That if I'm putting something out in the world, it's going to use kind of these kind of hex coin rules. It's going to use a couple other things, and it's going to I would have if I was doing something I wanted instead of whatever, I just use my own house system, which would be more or less OSR compatible, but it's building on more of an OD&D chassis. Um, and I've been filling around with it. And if you've watched some of the streams in the past, I've gone through some of it. I was going back and forth trying to figure out what I like, what I want my attributes today. And actually, I'm thinking of getting rid of these. So I wrote these down. What I have right now for if I was going to have kind of classic attributes, these are what I have right now: strength, speed, lore, and self. That's it. So self, kind of your ego, but this is like your illusions. Your kind of your sense of self. Your sense of self. Like if you were charmed or if you're like that would affect your self, right? That kind of thing. Like are you kind of your own. It's kind of in a way because I always thought about wits in the sense of keeping your wits about you kind of thing, and this is kind of that also. It's like sort of self control, stuff like I know who I am and kind of where like I'm sort of in control of myself versus I've lost myself. That's kind of what that means, if that makes sense. Strength is strength basically. It's more like all around body stuff, but basically strength. Speed. I don't, something I don't like is I never like that your dexterity is like your hand-eye coordination and your speed. It's no, like speed. Like everything else is kind of skill based. If you are handy with knives, it's because you got a knife skill. It's not kind of you have a high dex, but you can be fast. So this is speed. Lore, it's your stuff you've learned, stuff recall. That's like all that kind of thing. I might call it something else. I go back and forth between lore, learning. I don't want it to be a memory thing, so maybe it is a memory thing. I don't want it to be intelligence. This isn't about being smart. Hey, Howard Hughes, see you. Hey, appreciate the the tip in there. Howard Hughes asks, let's see. Uh, Gary Con is in 50-ish days. Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna make it this time. I actually got to talk to Daniel. Maybe I was wondering whether I could swing around with him, but the timing of Gary Con is not that great right now for me. So I'm probably not gonna make it. But if you're there, let me know how it goes. And if I can make it, I'll let you know. But I really appreciate Howard Hughes. Have a great night. Uh so those are your main kind of attributes. Strength, speed, lower self. It's kind of stand-ins for strength, dex, intelligence, wisdom, but intelligent in terms of like things like languages, right? That kind of thing. Self, you have your wits about you, sort of thing, right? That's that. Now, I think the thing is that was my big for myself. You may hate this idea, but I'm in love with it right now. I'm in the kind of honeymoon period. Is I've been thinking about this strain or effort in my kind of homebrew BX system. I've had a system. I've been using this thing I call hero dice, where the players have this pool of dice and that they can use to either do special effects or also affect rolls. Things like it can be used as intuition. It can be used to power special abilities. It can be used to do all this stuff. But I've always been struggling with the accounting of the dice. And you can also use it like you can lose dice. It's kind of, I try to do a bunch of stuff. I try to do like I have this resource. I want to do a bunch with it. But then I started to think about it, especially when people have asked me, because I've talked about it when I was doing streams about my game, like, oh, I should write this up. And as I've been struggling with, like, yeah, I should write it up. Let me write up. I'm like, it's just kind of, I feel like it's just kind of clunky, kind of clunky. And I've been struggling with, like, well, is there a way I can kind of do this and it be a little bit neater? And I was thinking about it, because the one thing I liked about the Hero Dice concept was that all the characters, they have the same resource. You use it for different things. If you're a wizard type, you're going to use it for magic. If you're a fighter type, you're going to use it for fightery things. But it's the same resource. So the rules for using it pretty much be the same. There were some variations on different ways of using it, but there's like maybe 2 or 3 different ways you could use it, but basically if you were then to swap classes, you're using it for different things, but you're not relearning a whole new system. Like the system just works. And I thought in my games, the granted super small sample size, all that disclaimers, I thought it was working pretty well. But of course, when you're doing this and you're rolling this out in your own game, you get to explain, re-explain. People get comfortable with it, and when you're trying to write it up as something you're going to hand to a total stranger, that kind of changes things. And as I was kind of writing it up, I'm like, this is kind of clunky. And I was thinking about like, well, in my home game, yeah, we managed it all right, but there was, it was fine. But I don't know, it could be do better. So I've been talking about strain, which I realized, like, what if I reversed it? Instead of saying like you have these dice and you're sort of using them up, what if you're not tracking the dice, you're tracking the use. You're tracking the lack of them, if that makes sense. Strain. And I thought like, yeah, strain, effort. So the idea would be that you have so much of this, you have so much basically say energy. Let's say you have energy, and as you do things, you take on strain, and strain fills your energy. So say you start out with 3 energy. I got 3 energy. Over the top of the world. Woohoo! I'm rolling the world with my all my 3 energy. You take on a strain, now you have 2 energy. Until you can get rid of that strain, you've essentially lost access to that a third of that resource, that unit of resource. And it's kind of like what would happen when you lose your hero dice. If you start out with 5 hero dice, you did some things, then you would do something and you had to spend that hero die, it was gone. But now I don't have to track the dice. It's like, okay, I'm just tracking the strain. I have the strain, and then what then I have to do is I have to, when I'm doing something, I have to account for the strain first. Hey, NGL. So instead of me worrying about necessarily like the dice part, I thought, well, let's say I have that 3 energy, right? And everything I'm doing is predicated on 3 energy. Now I've got 1 strain. So now when I go to do something, I say, okay, I've got 3 energy, but before I can do the thing I want to do, I have to account for the strain. And so I have to basically lock one of my energy in the strain, and now I have 2 energy left. That was kind of how I was looking at it. The thing that today I was like, oh, this might be really good is okay, extending strain. So I have this thing strain. What are all the different ways I can use about it? I was saying like, oh, great, because I always liked using something like exhaustion for things like insanity, because I don't want to get into. I just think it's like I don't want to say like I don't want to get into types of insanity. I don't want to say to somebody how they should. To me, it's a little bit of a mental health, a little bit of a delicate subject, and I'm like, you know what, you decide how it is, because the upshot mechanically is you're just not as sharp on things because this is happening to you. And I feel like something like exhaustion does that, right? In fifth edition, exhaustion does things like gives you disadvantage. All the things that you could take that and you could map it to just physically being tired, or you can map it to being mentally tired or stressed. It doesn't matter. Mechanically, they're coming out the same, whether it's from one thing or another. So I thought, great, that's strain, right? Okay, strain. If you get exhausted, like you're traveling too hard and you decide, you know what, even though we need to rest, we need to push on, you pick up a strain and it works just the same, right? So I have this one resource. Again, I've stretched it out. Okay, great. It's not just for you basically using effort and powers, it's for using effort in other ways. Great. Strain. Boom. Great. Then I thought, well, what if it was also damage? What if basically everything, whether it's physical, mental, whatever, all just was different strain? And in the end, much like when we were talking about provisions or something where I say, like, I don't, it doesn't really matter whether it's food or water. Ultimately, I thought, like, man, I mean, for me anyway, that might work. It doesn't really matter. Like, maybe it's all about that strain and where it is. So I don't think I can do this really well on here. Maybe I can. So think of this concept. Let me try to outline this concept quickly. See if I can zoom in. I know I can. Oops, not zoom in there. Zoom in here. Let me get this concept quickly. So imagine you've got your strength. Ugh. You know what? There you go. STR. And you're kind of much like our three energy. You got three boxes. You've got your speed. Also got three boxes. And I'll just do this one. And you've got your lore. That's three boxes. Okay. So if you're going to do something that's engaging your strength, this is a this is so the other thing I should mention is this is part of a dice pool system. So if I have three of these things, these represent dice that I can use potentially to do something strong, whatever that would be. All right. Now we've got strain. And let's just say we've got we'll just say for our I don't know if it's not going to let me really type that in. Well, let's just say we're starting off and we've got three strain. So we can, depending on what it is, this is our sheet. We try to do something, and it's going to be situational. It's going to be the GM may say it was a pit trap. So these are your, you have physical and mental, right? So okay, you got to take three strain. You got to put it somewhere physical. So I go, okay, I'm going to do that. So what does this mean? Just by doing this, if I'm going to do something, if I'm going to do something that is engaging with speed, I've only got one speed now because the rest is being, cause every time I do something, I got to account for that strain. The strain's eating these three things up. They're locked up. Until I get rid of that strain, I've locked them up. And then I was thinking about, well, where's your con? Right? Where's that vitality? And I thought, kind of similar to what we were talking about. Like, if you're tough, I can just say that gives you an extra box somewhere. So instead of having a whole toughness con, why don't I just have that like, oh, you're tough? Okay, well, you got an extra box down here. Oh, you're super tough? You have an extra box down here. And these are just for holding strain. So if you're tough, suddenly you can get rid of that. And you can mark it. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I guess it's a pencil. You can mark it here instead. Oh, okay. Well, what if I'm fast? Well, you know, get another box, whatever. And so what happens is when damage comes along, depending on, remember, I said, like, depending on the type, whatever we might need to decide, we say is like, okay, I got those filled. Well, my, if I can't, if I have no more strength and I'm immobile, I'm basically down. This becomes essentially my con, my vitality. And like I said, we can have extra ones in there. If we want to if we want to simulate somebody being like a Gimli or something, and like right, they're tough, but they're not fast or strong, then maybe they've got some extra boxes down here. That's how we do that. But ultimately, whatever's in this bag, this is your physical. And if you get down to this being filled, well, you're immobilized. Can't move. If you get down to this, you're basically dropping down. You're, I don't know, you're unconscious, you collapse, you can't hold anything up. But it's all strain. And the same thing, right? If all this lore gets filled up, well, then you're kind of non-functional. Whatever you want to call it, you're learning your memory, like you're out of it. If yourself back there gets filled up, then you've lost yourself. You're witless. You're whatever's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I think it unlocks, for me, I was thinking anyway, that it unlocks some interesting things. Because what about on a rest, if you could shuffle these around a bit? So what if you say on a rest, you can do a couple things. On a rest, you can erase one. It's a long enough rest, you can erase one. And then also maybe you could shuffle these around. So maybe you're worried about speed. So you say, okay, I'm going to be, well, I can't get rid of all of them, right? But I'm going to get rid of one and I'm going to kind of do that instead. So I'm going to be weak as all heck, but we need to move. So I'm going to move. And, you can think about it in fiction when a guy like, is able to get to their feet, right? Or something and go. Or maybe, they're going to take away. I need, if you're a wizard, let's say, or something else where it's lore based, you're like, you know what? I'm going to get rid of, whoops. I need all the lore kind of stuff I get. And I don't care about speed. You're going to have to carry me. Maybe I'm going to fill all these up. Like I'm going to be immobile. You're going to be dragging me. Marines, we are leaving. But when we get out there and I need to cast that spell, I'm going to be able to cast that spell. Or at least I'm going to be able to give it a good old college try with those two. And this all came together kind of today. Like I had pieces of this in my brain, but my brain, maybe tomorrow I'll look back at this and go like, oh, this is awful. But right now I'm like, oh, this is kind of what I want. This is what I want. Whether you guys out there would want something like this, I don't know. This is what I want. And the system it's like a dice pool driven combat is going to be basically a lot like kind of chainmail, OD&E sort of chainmail where you're rolling sort of dice per like manpower, doing that way, not rolling D20 plus damage. So the damage is going to be small numbers, but meaningful because you might only have 4 or 5 or 6 of these things. And, you're going to fill them. Now, the other thing is you do get because you have this manpower concept, if you're third level, you have 3 dice you can use, which you can also fill up. So you do get more of it as you level up. But even if you were at level 10, let's say that's 10 dice, right? And if you're fighting a bunch of people, still the numbers are small. No one says it's a cool concept, like the idea of sacrificing mental fatigue to put more physical stamina, or vice versa. Yeah, and they would all be kind of things there's be things you have to do to rest. It's not, in my mind anyway, it's not like you get hit a bunch of times, combat ends, and you go like, and then all of a sudden you change it up. But it would be like you've rested, and now you can kind of like rechannel your energies. But I thought it was pretty, and it's I guess in a sense it's like a little bit of this mini game of like, oh, okay, how do I fill these things? And then I'm getting rid of them. But I liked it because what I like about it is I feel like you can do some interesting things with it. It can model some different things that I like. It can model you slowing down or getting weaker or just losing your own concentration. Just all these different things where you're being worn down, but I don't have a whole bunch of different resources to do it. And I don't have a bunch of attributes that I'm not really using outside of the modifiers. Like they're meaningful. If you've got 3 strength in terms of those dice, I'm using it as many ways I think as I can at the moment because it's tracking what you can spend and it's also tracking kind of what you have. And that. Now there is another component of this. There's more. And this is something I worked on a stream for a bit and it's this idea of virtues and vices. I like alignments. I do. I'm just going to say it. I like alignments, but I understand they don't work for a lot of people. The format may not be good. And I even like the moral. I know there's there's this kind of cosmic teams alignments, which I like. But I also like the idea of saying, here's who I am as a character. But they're kind of, I don't know, they're sort of vague and I know they don't work, whatever. So, and I always like, and I've come to a realization for myself that what I want is I want really players to engage with it. I don't want to be one. I want them to be kind of descriptive and not proactive. You've got the stuff, you decide. And then kind of at the end of the day, you are what your actions and whatever say you are, as opposed to someone being locked into a path. I don't like where the GM goes, you can't do that because you're chaotic good. Excuse me, something like that. I don't like that. What I want is more you do stuff, and in the end of the day, we look at it and say, okay, this is kind of who you are. But I've been thinking about, well, how can I do it where it's a little bit more player facing, and I want to be a little more detailed because the other thing with alignments is, oh, who can agree on this or that, the other? Okay, fine. So, you know, I'm kind of reaching back to sort of medieval stuff. I was like, okay, well, you have like the seven deadly sins and the seven heavenly virtues kind of things. And I'm not using all of them because when I did this on stream a while back, I was looking at them. Some of them just like sloth. And how is sloth kind of gameable? Because my idea here is you have vices and you have virtues. And the idea is that, and I have it here, right? So vices, they're selfish and they're something offensive. Virtues, on the other hand, are defensive and selfless. You cannot use, if you have a virtue, and the virtues and vices work similar to here, is you will, through character generation, which I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work yet, you'll have some, these are on bands. So you will either have be in the middle, like a zero, or if let's say like in the sense of a negative attribute, you'll have hubris, or on the positive side, you'll have prudence. You can't have both, right? If you have hubris, you can use it to do things offensively for you. If you have prudence, you can use things defensively, but not for you. So I have this kind of, okay, well, if you're going to use, and these again will give you more dice. So if you're looking at this guy and he's like, he's got to do something. So let's come here, right? So we got this guy, he's got that much, he's got one strength left. He's tapped out. And maybe he's got a bunch more strain. So he's looking, it's rough for him. If he's doing something kind of for himself, and this would be a conversation with a GM, right? And you go say, okay, um, whatever that is. So maybe I can engage one of these things to save, like if okay, I have no I'm basically immobile. I am immobile, but I gotta save this person that's standing over there. Can I use some last thing to just will myself to leap across to throw myself as a human shield in front of this person, even though I'm whatever. Like that would be using whatever one of these fits. Oops, temperance. Temperance. That would be using one of a virtue. If it was, I'm immobilized, can I rise up and hack this mother down? Even if it's like a dragon or something else, right? It's not. It's about you, person, not the target. Okay, that would be using like wrath. That would be doing that, and I like the idea that the whole point of kind of being that there's this. It's making a statement over some of these things, which I like. I'm all about kind of making statements. You can of course change it for your own game, but this is how it's going to come out of the box, so to speak. And I'm trying to find these kind of. I like this idea. This kind of sort of these kind of meters. Now, this one down here is a little bit different, right? Despair. It's kind of like that's you going down the drain. Like if you get too much despair, I haven't decided on what the number is yet. Then you're lost. That's where you've just gotten. That's like it would be similar to like, well, you've gone full on chaotic evil, and this is a good campaign, so your guys are going to become an NPC. Like this is just you. You've lost your humanity basically if you get too much despair. That's kind of the one other kind of thing, and of course, hope would be is sort of the opposite of that. If you could maintain hope in such hard hard times. Um, so I have these. So these would be right now would be kind of your stats, but I might actually get. But the thing is I'm not sure whether I'm going to have these or not, or just have the virtues and vices. That's what I haven't decided. I kind of like having them, but these might actually not be like rolled. You might just have some, and then you'll have because what like going back to those backgrounds, like I might say hunter. Okay, hunter, you're going to gain a speed, and you're going to gain whatever, a speed and then something else. And so then you'll kind of go through those backgrounds and you'll end up having some of these, but you're not going to get rolled. Whereas these would probably be rolled to start, and then it's up to you to kind of deal with it. Now, if you're doing a bunch of offensive stuff, it'll be tempting to use your vices because that's kind of what they're for. But then you'll have to roll dice and see if you gain despair, which you don't want. Um, we'll see. I'm hopefully gonna get stuff together well, so I can maybe give it a good old fashioned play test. Hopefully sometime soon. but I kinda had some, like, mini breakthroughs. I might still have a breakdown. Breakthroughs today where I was just like, all of a sudden, I'm doing stuff. I'm like, "Oh, like this." I suddenly, like, got this thing that at least it's like, "Yes, that works for me. Oh, this works for me." So it's really cool to get this stuff done and kind of on sort of 2 things because I had this this part working in my brain and then also the actions stuff, this stuff working. Somehow I managed to get a bunch of that work done. In any case, it's almost 10 o'clock at night here. My family's got to show up momentarily. Um, I gotta get things ready and close up shop, and it's a round time number. Any last words, last anything from anybody before I close it up? Questions, comments, statements about the weather? Do I have any? I don't have any more milk. Oh, I got a little. I did not balance my milk and tea drinkings. I end up with more milk or more tea than milk, but that'll be all right. It's okay if nobody has anything. I will not be. I will not be insulted. So it doesn't seem like anybody has anything. I know there's always a slight delay between the chat and me, but I'm guessing we are golden. At some point, this stuff will make it out and about. Like it's coming. If you're wondering about that, if you're interested in it, just stay tuned. If you see me where I am or follow me in different places, I'll let folks know if this seems like it's right up your alley. It's the first form it comes out in is going to be pretty simple and like I kind of the idea is I'm putting it out mostly for me, for my use, and then things I do will sort of this will just be my house kind of system, and then I'll see what hopefully I play test it and it plays kind of how I want it to play and it's doing what I want it to do, and then if all that stuff happens, then maybe it'll be available in different ways, and then we'll see what happens from there. But that's all I got so far. I really appreciate folks hanging around with me while I was chatting about it and working on it. I always love these because even though it might seem like counterintuitive is not the right word, I can just say that it's helpful to talk through things because it forces you to kind of rethink about it, rephrase it, go over in your brain again, make it sensible to someone who isn't in your head. And I find it often kind of clarifies stuff. So I really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your weekend if you're watching this now or any day or night, whenever you do end up watching to it. I will be back probably Monday, unless I get another break from the family tomorrow. One never knows, but I wouldn't count on it. So probably on Monday. Um, just be safe, be good, play some games. Game on, and I'll talk to you later, everybody. Bye now.